Final item of business is members' business debate on motion 20919 in the name of Stuart McMillan on communication failure, a review of the accessibility of health information for blind and partially sighted people. And this debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Would those members who wish to speak in the debate please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Stuart McMillan to open the debate for around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, at the outset, I'd like to thank every member who has signed the motion and also those who are going to speak in the debate this evening. I also want to thank Laura Jones of RNIB Scotland for her excellent work producing this report, Communication Failure, a review of the accessibility of health information for blind and partially sighted people. For the purposes of the debate, I will just refer to it as the report. There are some members of RNIB Scotland in the gallery this evening, and I'm glad that there are some people here. I do chair the cross-party group on visual impairment, and I have done since my re-election in 2011. The cross-party group has discussed a wide variety of issues and written to both the Scottish and UK governments, as well as local authorities, and formally to European parliamentarians. Our cross-party group has never been shy at attempting to find a solution to an issue or thanking public bodies for their progress, such as recently writing to and thanking Edinburgh City Council on the issue of the banning of A-boards on the streets in our capital. Any activity that the cross-party group has undertaken is about making Scotland more accessible and fairer for people who are blind or partially sighted. On the 17th of February, RNIB Scotland hosted an event in Glasgow publishing this report. The room was full and it consisted of both people who are blind or partially sighted, as well as including health professionals. And during my contribution that day, I indicated that I would seek to obtain a members' debate, as I believe that this issue needs, first of all, to be acknowledged, but also to be addressed. I will provide a few suggestions to help with the issues, as I believe that it's the correct way and also manner to actually take the findings of this excellent report further. However, I do want to touch upon some of the findings first. This is the second such report in this area by RNIB Scotland. In 2010, RNIB Scotland produced a report on the accessibility of health information for blind and partially sighted people. This report found a lack of recognition of the specific additional needs of blind and partially sighted people within the health service. It showed that blind and partially sighted people didn't experience the same patient confidentiality as sighted people, as they were often forced to rely on others to give details of appointments, diagnosis and patient advice. And the Patient Rights Act Scotland, the Patient Rights Scotland Act 2011 and also its accompanying Charter of Patient Rights and Responsibilities have since set out that, and I quote, "You have the right to be given information about your care and treatment in a format or language that meets your needs." I therefore believe that this new report, published a decade later, should have shown major improvements. RNIB Scotland's report highlights 4 key findings and also 7 key recommendations. Of the 4 key findings, the first one is patient confidentiality being breached. Secondly, individuals being put at risk. Thirdly, some individuals being told that they could cope without an accessible format of their information. And also, fourthly, some people not feeling, and I quote, worthy enough to make requests and or complain to their health service. I'm sure, Presiding Officer, that every single one of us in this chamber will have been disappointed by these findings, and we would like to thank those who took part in the research. The helpful briefing from Royal Blind provided the following quote: "People with sight loss who access our services have complained about receiving self-testing kits, e.g. for bowel cancer, that are not visually impairment friendly. This breaches patient confidentiality, as individuals must rely on carers or relatives to assist them with tests that should be taken in private." And it goes on to say that we have had feedback that private companies, such as telecommunication companies or utilities providers, are often better at accessible formatting by default than healthcare providers. Clearly, no matter which way any of us look at this situation, every patient is of equal value, and every patient not only deserves but should expect information to be available to them. I welcome the recommendations that are provided in this report, but I would like to acknowledge that some of the recommendations are being part delivered. This is welcome, however, it proves there is still more to do and that all health boards really need to up their game. A more consistent approach across all the health boards would be extremely useful and also very helpful. On the issue of suggestions, I did say I was going to come back to this. I'm aware that the report has been sent to every health board, and I personally handed over copies of it, and also a CD version and a Braille version to NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, because I had a meeting with them that afternoon. So well done to the health boards that engaged with the research for the report, but I was disappointed that 5 didn't. It may well have been an oversight, but nonetheless blind and partially sighted patients do deserve better. So my first suggestion is that I would encourage health boards to engage with RNIB Scotland, even at this stage, to inform them of how they communicate with blind and partially sighted patients. Secondly, I believe that a short-term working group involving both the NHS and also the wider sector in patient health communication would be advantageous. I'm sure that this would provide an opportunity for the health boards to fully understand the challenges blind and partially sighted patients actually face. This group needn't be a cast of thousands, but focused with key staff involved. It could also include some of the health boards who didn't engage, as well as some of those who did. And thirdly, it might be worth the NHS boards considering contracting in communication services from any one or some of the organisations who actually can provide information in Braille. There's a number of organisations that actually could do this. This could be undertaken even on a trial basis to see how effective or otherwise it is. Ultimately, every patient wants to obtain correct and proper information in a timely fashion. Obtaining little or no information is unacceptable in this day and age. Younger people are increasingly using smartphones as accessible technology is inbuilt. However, for some older people, Braille will still be the first form of communication that they will use. And with a growing older population as a whole, the blind and partially sighted community will be very much part of this growing older community. Ultimately, there are 170,000 patients in Scotland who require better information about their healthcare. Using the range of technologies available, I'm sure that solutions can be found at very little cost to enable 170,000 people to take more accurate decisions about their healthcare. Once again, Presiding Officer, in my conclusion, I'd like to thank everyone who has actually helped make this debate possible. I would also once again like to thank Laura Jones of RNIB Scotland for producing this important report. And this report clearly highlights that although our NHS undertakes life-saving and world-leading research and constantly challenges itself as new medicines, technologies and illnesses happen, there are still some more fundamental issues that do need to be addressed. And I hope all NHS boards read the report, understand the issues, listen to today's debate, engage with the external organisations who may be able to assist, and see this as an opportunity to deliver improved outcomes for Scotland's 170,000 people who are blind or partially sighted. Thank you very much.
We move on to the open debate and speeches of around 4 minutes, please. Jeremy Balfour, followed by Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by thanking Stuart McMillan for bringing forward this important debate and for raising awareness of the RNIB review communication failure that considers the accessibility of health information for blind and partially sighted people here in Scotland. Back in 2019, RNIB Scotland produced a report on the accessibility of health information for blind and partially sighted people. The report found a lack of recognition of the specific additional needs of blind and partially sighted people with the health service. It showed that people with visual impairment did not experience the same patient confidentiality as sighted people, and on many occasions forced to rely on others to give details of appointments, diagnosis and patient advice. Subsequently, the Patients' Rights Scotland Act 2011 and the Charter of Patient Rights and Responsibilities set out that you have the right to be given information about your care and treatment in a format or language that meets your needs. Communication failure follows almost a decade on from the passing of this legislation, and is based on interviews with people with sight loss and information from various health boards. The case studies featured in the review make for depressing reading, and interviewers referring to an inability to receive documents in accessible format, a lack of awareness amongst NHS staff about the services offered by the NHS to improve access to documents, online processes that are inaccessible to people with sight loss, and people with sight loss reporting they were made to feel not worthy. Like Mr McMillan, I was very disappointed to note that a number of health boards did not reply to the request for information, which suggests they are failing in their responsibility to adhere to NHS Scotland's accessible information policy. Screenings, doctor's appointments, medical tests are a part of our life. It's the way that we stay healthy, yet they must be accessible. Many of us may have also experienced anxiety and worry when making a GP appointment or when waiting for the results of medical tests. For many people with sight loss, this anxiety and worry will be significantly higher, and healthcare staff should know how to support the needs of blind and partially sighted people, both physically and emotionally. Currently, this does not appear to be happening consistently across our health boards here in Scotland. The review makes for a number of recommendations, which we've already heard explained earlier on, relating to accessing healthcare information, care, empowerment, and helping people to get the full control of their healthcare needs. Currently, there are over 175,000 people in Scotland living with sight loss. As the population of Scotland continues to age, it is likely that this number will increase. Without accessible health information, people with sight loss face growing exclusion, with ultimately a greater burden put on NHS Scotland. No person with sight loss should feel that they are not worthy enough when asking for accessible information for the health service. Can I therefore urge the Health Minister to ask health boards across Scotland to consider the recommendations of the report, to take a consistent approach to availability of format of accessible information, and to take seriously their duty as outlined in the Patient's Charter of Rights. Thank you.
Call Annabel Ewing to be followed by Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to have been called to speak in this members' debate this evening, and I would congratulate Stuart McMillan on securing the debate, and I know that he is assiduous in raising issues that impact on the lives of those who are blind or suffer from partial sightedness, and indeed that he progresses these issues in a very determined manner indeed as convener of the cross-party group on visual impairment. As has been stated, this members' debate this evening is focused on the most recent RNIB Scotland report entitled Communication Failure, a review of the accessibility of health information for blind and partially sighted people in Scotland. And at the outset, can I commend RNIB Scotland for the comprehensive work that they have carried out in assessing where matters currently stand for those with visual impairment in Scotland in terms of accessing information about their own healthcare. And where matters stand, Presiding Officer, is evidently not satisfactory, for it is clear that the patient confidentiality of those with visual impairment is being breached. In fact, as we have heard, they have to rely on carers or relatives or friends perhaps to read on their behalf their confidential correspondence from the NHS, and as Stuart McMillan rightly referred to Royal Blind and Scottish War Blinded's submission in advance of this debate, it was put in very stark focus when it was mentioned that, of course, correspondence would include in this regard test kits, for example, for bowel cancer, and that you would have to then go and get somebody else to read that out to you. It's not really acceptable. And also, we have heard about the breach of the underlying legislation and Charter of Patient Rights and Responsibility, where further to the legislation and the Charter, those with a visual impairment have a right to be given information about their care and treatment in a format that meets their needs. Indeed, it is therefore not beyond question that individuals are in fact being put at risk of missing appointments, and treatments, and perhaps of seeing a deterioration in their own health. This is, again, not acceptable. And in their interactions with the NHS, it is not surely for those with a visual impairment to start to kick up a fuss and make a campaign, but rather the onus must lie with the relevant health board to get this right. And in that regard, RNIB Scotland has set forth a number of recommendations, and these include calling on each health board to now review their own procedures to ensure that they have accessible health information policies in place to tackle the very serious concerns that have been flagged up. And of course, they call also for appropriate staff training for healthcare staff to be put in place. I very much hope that this work will now proceed as quickly as possible. And as the MSP for Cowdenbeath constituency, I certainly will be writing to the Chief Executive of NHS Fife, because they were one of the NHS boards which did not respond to the survey from RNIB Scotland. And I will be asking the Chief Executive to explain why that was the case, and also to ask the Chief Executive of NHS Fife what in fact they will now do to ensure that the concerns flagged up by RNIB Scotland are in fact met. Presiding Officer, here in Scotland we have of course a real opportunity to lead the way in ocular care, given our commitment to free eye examinations. And I think therefore it is vital that we ensure that those with visual impairment have access to the health information that they need. And of course this would pertain to information about any ocular care, and it would pertain to any other health care. And health boards must do better in this regard. And I would ask the Minister, when she is winding up, to clarify what steps the Scottish Government can now take to ensure that health boards discharge their responsibilities in this matter. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
And the last of the open debate contributions is Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to Stuart McMillan for highlighting this important report by RNIB Scotland and for bringing it to the Chamber, and also for his ongoing work and commitment in this area and the important work that the cross-party group on visual impairment is involved in. And as others have said, Laura Jones and RNIB Scotland really do deserve to be congratulated for the work that's gone into this report. And I'm also grateful to Royal Blind and Scottish War Blinded for their work supporting people of all ages and those who have served in our armed forces, and for the briefing that they have provided ahead of the debate. I am proud to recently have become the patron for Disability Equality Scotland, and I refer to my register of interest. And Disability Equality Scotland works to make Scotland inclusive for all. But reports like this highlight just how far we still need to go. Not accounting for the needs of blind or partially sighted people, particularly when it comes to medical needs and health records, is not only discriminatory, but it's also potentially dangerous, particularly if people miss important appointments. We've heard about the potential for huge breaches of patient confidentiality, but the margin for error when it comes to people missing treatments because they are not receiving proper communications is worrying to me. And like Annabel Ewing, who was right to say that it's not acceptable that this is happening, particularly the example given about self-testing kits around bowel cancer screening. That's a huge issue, not only of privacy, but of dignity. And hopefully this debate will really see some change happen very quickly, because it's not something that should be happening in 2020. And like Annabel Ewing, with regards to the health boards in my own parliamentary region, it is a matter that I'll take up, and I hope that members across the chamber will do the same. The report certainly is a useful tool for MSPs to raise issues with our local health board representatives. And as Scottish Labour Health spokesperson, I do hope to work collaboratively with ministers on what we can do at a national level to support boards to ensure that the needs of partially sighted or blind people are being met in full. But I do believe it can't just be left to individuals and to individual charities to champion this, because it is fundamentally an issue of human rights. And Royal Blind and Scottish War Blinded have made that point in their briefing, and I think that's something that we should all be guided by. Locally, I've previously had the pleasure of visiting the excellent Guide Dogs team based in Hamilton and doing a blindfolded walk around my local area, having to navigate street furniture, including A-boards, to understand the challenges that blind and partially sighted people face. And as I've experienced through my work supporting Disability Equality Scotland, a lack of access panels locally can inhibit the work we do in our planning system to make sure that the needs of those with different accessible needs are fully taken into account. And I think this report shows that that's not only a matter about the physical built environment, but also about communication tools as well. So tonight we're talking about a community which already faces significant challenges in navigating daily life without also having to fight for access to their own medical information. I think we can do better, we must do better. It does concern me that there is a real lack of progress, and we see that RNIB Scotland flagged this up in 2010 in previous research. So I'm interested to hear from the Minister's point of view why we're a bit stuck, what we can do to help health boards to make some progress. Will there be some nationally coordinated action? I know that we all have constituents who would benefit from real progress in this area, and hopefully tonight's members' debate could be a real turning point so we can realise that progress. Thank you.
I call now on Claire Hockey to respond to the debate for around 7 minutes. Please, Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to respond on behalf of the Scottish Government, and can I also add my thanks and congratulations to Stuart McMillan for bringing this motion for debate this evening, and pay tribute to his long-standing work in this area. All of us here share the goal of improving access to assessment, care and support for people with vision impairment. And this government is absolutely clear that blind and partially sighted people in Scotland should be able to access the information they need in accessible formats. We welcome this report from the Royal National Institute of Blind People, the RNIB, one of the UK's leading sight loss charities and the largest community of blind and partially sighted people. They're an inspiration in the field and have worked very closely with us to influence and progress the recommendations in the Scottish Government's See Here strategy, which closely align with the recommendations in this report. The strategy, launched in April 2014, provides a framework of recommendations on which to improve services and opportunities for people with a sensory impairment in Scotland. We have created a network of See Here leads and allocated almost £4 million of funding to support their local partnership, develop and deliver initiatives and services. Progress includes funding 200 sensory champions to receive training on different communication types and languages and equipment to support people who have a hidden or undiagnosed sensory loss, for example, people with a learning disability or conditions such as dementia or stroke. And the champions take this training back to their workplace, such as in care homes, and share the learning with their colleagues. We've also developed and introduced accessible training resources for professionals and agencies in the form of e-learning modules on sight awareness and deaf awareness. And these modules are available to health professionals on the NHS training platform and are also available to the general public. And we have developed See Here kit bags, which are available to all social work teams in adult and older people's services, occupational therapy teams, and are held in 7 Police Scotland bases across Fife. And these include a signature strip to support visually impaired individuals to sign their name, an amplifier which is controlled by the adult and allows them to hear conversations and engage in discussion, and a magnifier which helps individuals with visual loss who may need print enlarged to allow them to read. We know that these actions make a positive difference to people's lives, and promoting the rights of disabled people must be central to everything that we do, and tackling inequality is one of the Scottish Government's top priorities. We have to ensure disabled people benefit from all that we are doing to improve the lives of the people of Scotland as they continue to experience inequalities and barriers to independent living. And I was really felt heartwarmed to hear the cross-party support and encouragement for that. This is why the Charter for Patients' Rights and Responsibilities is such a useful tool, as it summarises what people are entitled to when they use NHS services and receive NHS care in Scotland. The Charter makes clear our expectation that everyone should be given information about their treatment and care in a way that they understand and in a format or language that meets their needs. And when the Charter was revised last summer, this government wrote to NHS boards to remind them about their obligations under the Patient Rights Scotland Act 2011 to make copies available without charge to patients, staff and members of the public. Let me be clear. This government takes the rights of everyone using the NHS in Scotland very seriously, and creating a fairer and more equal society is a priority, and our ambition to achieve equality for all go hand in hand with our ambitions for a strong economy. We believe that a fairer Scotland can only be realised when we secure equal rights for everyone. We recognise that effective solutions to the problems and barriers faced by disabled people must be drawn from the lived experience of disabled people, as highlighted by the experience of those with sight loss that were interviewed for the RNIB's report. The case studies in the report make it absolutely clear how important it is that information is available in many ways that take into account everyone's differing needs, as patient confidentiality is breached due to individuals relying on carers, relatives or friends to read appointment letters on their behalf. The Scottish approach to service design means that people will be engaged in co-designing products and services that meet their needs and deliver sustainable, fit-for-purpose service models. And we're therefore committed to working with disabled people to develop policies and the approaches required to solve problems and dismantle barriers. We have high ambitions for the change that we want to see, and disabled people have the right to know less. Indeed, this report highlights that there are lots of good examples of systems in place that do work and have solved problems. So we want to learn from those and see solutions embedded consistently across the country, and see all boards engage with sight loss organisations to provide a more person-centred approach. I welcome this report and accept the recommendations, as there are clearly improvements to be made, and I've instructed my officials to write to boards again to remind them of their duties under the Equality Act and their responsibilities as summarised by the Charter of Patients' Rights and Responsibilities. Officials will ask health boards to review the policies they have in place to support people with sight loss, to protect patient confidentiality and to make websites accessible for all. In addition, through the work of the National Network of See Here Leeds, we will work across authorities to support boards to determine how to address the barriers that blind and partially sighted people are currently experiencing, to raise awareness of the rights that people with sight loss have, and to improve access to healthcare facilities and to provide accessible health information. Presiding Officer, I want to close this debate by thanking everyone who has participated in such a collegiate way, and it's good to see such cross-party support for this report. I want to thank the RNIB for its very comprehensive and informative report, and by reaffirming this government's commitment to improving access to information, care and support for people with sensory impairments.
That concludes the debate. This meeting is closed.